Good afternoon, and today I'm not going to talk about politics. I'm going to talk about art and culture instead. Like many people, I am not a fan of contemporary, what passes as contemporary high art, by which I mean conceptualism, postmodernism, and other examples of, or varieties of that type of art. Like deconstruction, when they say, oh, we're deconstructing modern Western art. Well, you're just being destructive. I don't think there's anything creative there. I think it's, for the most part, it's banal. And I think there's an element of snobbishness and contempt there for ordinary people. And you could see it. I mean, this attitude, I think it goes all the way back to the Russian writer, futurist, Mayakovsky, who titled a collection of one of his stories, A Slap in the Face of Public Taste. And I think that's very much there. Now, I don't see any innovation going on there either. I think the real innovation comes from science fiction and science fiction illustration and literature particularly, and this has seeped in to popular culture. Now, SF is the literature of change, of difference. It's informed by discoveries in cosmology, space travel, genetic engineering, and robotics. But it's at the level of popular culture, which I think means that it's largely ignored by the mainstream, and so doesn't reach the heights of the respect paid to the official art, the stuff that came in with Nicholas Hirota and the young British artists, although at the time they were just the most recent. Now, science fiction takes its name from Hugo Gernsback. And Hugo Gernsback was an American pulp publisher, published book magazines. He was impressed by the emerging technologies of the 20th century. He produced a magazine book called Popular Mechanics, which also published science fiction stories. He called that type of literature scientifiction. And then a group of his employees broke away, dissatisfied with the direction his magazines were going, and called it science fiction, and started the first one of the first science fiction pulp magazines. Now, you can see how much science fiction and the sensibility of science fiction has affected our culture through books like this, Lost Transmissions, The Secret History of Science Fiction and Fantasy, by Dizerina Boscovich, forward by Jeff Vandermeer. And it has sections on literature, film and television, architecture, art and design, music, fashion, fandom and pop culture. There's the foreword. The weird world of moving people, storm and gas. Some of this is, fantasy. Neil Gaiman talking about the Veraconium science fantasy books of M. John Harrison. That goes on, into, well, as I said, the unicorn-like creations of Möbius concept artist. Möbius was a comics artist. One of the great French ones. I think he was one of he was a member of the Les Humanoids, or I can't pronounce it. The Humanoids Associés. They produced things like Metal Hurlan, which became, which came over here in a Canadian version as heavy metal, although the French actually mean sounding metal. And there it is. Science fiction storytelling in the 1960s and 70s, set to music. And where I think this science fiction influence is strongest is strongest is in the exploration of robotics, cyborgization, and the way this is changing human sensibility and human consciousness. Now, here I'm talking about the downloaders and the extropians who emerged in the 1990s, and they all had the belief that we ought to upgrade ourselves. We should all download ourselves into computers or transform, as I think the next step in our evolution, or transform ourselves into cyborgs. And one of those is Professor Kevin Warwick, or the Professor of Robotics at Reading University. And he talks about how if we upgrade ourselves cybernetically and turn ourselves into cyborgs, we could have new senses, we could imagine things in far more dimensions than just 3, and so on. And one of those who is exploring this now is the performance artist, the Australian performance artist Stelarc. And I've put a picture of him up as the thumbnail to this, because a little while ago he worked with a group of robotics engineers to give himself a third hand. And it came out of his right arm like that, came out there. It was worked by his stomach muscles, so, tensed or clenched them in a certain way, and that moved some of the fingers. And he was there, as this picture shows, writing evolution with all 3 of his hands. Now that's fascinating. That opens up new possibilities. I mean, if you can imagine someone getting, say, 2 of those, but independent, two arms, cybernetic arms. You can imagine someone playing, an organ, both manuals simultaneously, both of the keyboards of the organ. Now, this kind of this theme was explored way back in the 1960s in the Muller-Fokkeer effect by John Sladek. Sladek is one of the most celebrated, I think, science fiction writers. And the Muller-Fokkeer effect is about a man who downloads himself into a computer. And there's an illustration in there of this man thinking, and it's done as a flowchart, which when I was growing up, you did it in computer science. You have these flowcharts showing the various decisions that would have to be made by a computer in order to follow out a problem. An algorithm basically. And it takes the form of man. There. And these explorations, and when computers first started appearing in art, I think some of the experiments, which I've no doubt the cultivars would call kitsch, were actually interesting, and I think they were more innovative at the time than what was going on in so-called high art, the conceptualism, the postmodernism, and the deconstructualism or whatever, deconstructionism. Now, one of those doing it was Jurgen Ziewe, and the New Territories. And what he did is he took artistic computer programs, things that generated fractals, as well as things that you could use to create landscapes and human and animal figures, and use them like Bryce and others, and use them to create strange cyberspace landscapes like these. I think his art mostly appeared on posters and postcards. There's another. And that's another. Fascinating artwork, and I think it is genuinely innovative. Even though, it's at the level of illustration, it's at the level of popular culture. Therefore, I think it's ignored by the mainstream. But I think this is driving the human imagination forward. And I would say it is a natural continuation of the exploration of a machine sensibility, which was promoted, most aggressively by the Italian futurists, when they said, when they celebrated the new industrial machine age, and said, a motor car with his pipes wrapping around it like the hair of the Medusa is more beautiful than the Battle of Samothrace, which is a famous classical painting, by which I mean it's a 19th century painting of looking back to classical antiquity. And that aesthetic ultimately goes back to Marcel Duchamps, the star dancer of the whatever. I can't remember what the ship's name is, and it's actually a drawing of the ship's engine. Now, Marcel Duchamps is celebrated for proto-futurist works and proto-cubist works, like Nude Descending a Staircase, and of course that urinal, which is a sort of forerunner of Dada, where just to show that anything can be put forward of art, he nailed a urinal to a canvas and called it the advance of a broken arm, and sent it in to an art exhibition. And of course, it's a great joke, and it's been going on since, informing Dada and the kind of anti-art movements. But I think the real innovation there, what comes out, the real innovation is his painting of a ship's engine. Because I don't think he had a direct influence on science fiction and the new sensibilities of science fiction. Although the futurists, I think, may well have done. I think it's that sensibility that is now pushing art forward and extending artistic innovation and the artistic sensibility and human vision of the universe around us, and the artistic vision. Thanks very much for listening.